GRT. It's fair to say that on the back of suggesting that we'd give this talk, done a lot of kind of, as a trust, as a bunch of trustees, we've done a lot of reminiscing, navel gazing, looking back in time at what on earth, how have we got to the point we're at today? And we're almost 30 years old. We've even gone off and found a copy of the original deeds. This is a scan and a screenshot of those. And you can see that, yeah, the GRT was formed on the 12th day of October in 1994. And it's, it's all there in black and white. And there were three prominent individuals that led to this formation. It is believed on the back of kind of meetings and conversations at Grayling Society meetings, and that's Robin Mulholland, Ross Gardiner, and Michael Mee. And the idea being was for the GRT to work together with the Grayling Society to enhance Grayling science, management and recreation. And just to kind of exemplify that point straight away, the list of objectives: advancement of public education in the promotion of conservation and the public benefit of Grayling in all waters in all countries in which it shares its natural habitat. And that again, promote and provide facilities for study and research relating to Grayling populations and their habitats, ecology, water quality and environment, particularly with a view to safeguarding and improving the same, and by the publication of the useful results of such research. And I think it's fair to say, almost 30 years on, that those words are still as relevant now as they were back then. And it's worth pointing out that the management requires very specific thoughts and considerations. They're very, very unique in the way that they kind of have their own zone of river dedicated to them. But as I said before, the way they fall between the gaps, they're not a true salmoniid like a salmon or a trout. And it's really important that this trust and the Grayling Society in collaboration are essentially raising the profile of the species to make sure they continue to get acknowledged and conserved. And a key point as part of one of the objectives was to, and you can see it's objective 8, and some of the others weren't as relevant now, but it's really important that I think we acknowledge the way that the GRT sits within the wider research community and other organisations that exist, and that they don't have a high conservation status, but they do need a cheerleader or a champion from a research perspective, which is, I think, us at the GRT, how we view ourselves. And that is captured here in that we would cooperate with other charities, voluntary bodies and research organisations and statutory bodies operating in furtherance of the objects or similar purposes to exchange information and advise with them. So again, right back in the day, it was acknowledged that the GRT wasn't going to be a standalone voice for Grayling, but more a way of driving things forward. The cog that makes the Grayling research machine work, if you will. And before we go on to kind of where we're at today, I think it'd be remiss of me if we didn't remember those who came before. Obviously, over 30 years to get to the point we're at right now has involved many illustrious and notable figures from the Grayling fishing and research community over the years. Many of you will know, some of them are no longer with us, it's sad to say. And in no way is this list intended to be comprehensive, and I've undoubtedly missed some people, either due to my short time with the trust, or there's just only so many names that can be put up. But you know, straight away the name at the top of everyone's list is always Robin Mulholland. He was involved in the Grayling Society before the Grayling Research Trust. He was a chairman of the Grayling Society and was absolutely instrumental in setting up the Grayling Research Trust, and served as its first chairman. Moving on, there's Les Jervis from Plymouth University, who had a particular passion for writing the science articles for the Grayling magazine in an attempt to drive that research into the hands and the minds of the anglers. Jon Bolland was a pioneer of Grayling research. Professor Roger Hughes, who, as I mentioned, was the chairman of the GRT when I joined, who led the UK Grayling genetics work. Steve Rhodes, an angler or an angling guide by trade, but had an absolutely encyclopedic knowledge of Yorkshire Grayling and was also a Grayling Society chairman for 8 years. Roger Cullum Kenyon was a very influential figure during the first Grayling Research Conference, which I'll come on to talk about in a little bit. And a great friend of mine, Ryan Taylor, who is a very, very vibrant chairman, I think it's fair to say, for a few years. Came at things from a slightly different perspective at times, but was exactly what was needed. And also led the decline of Yorkshire Grayling study that was done at the University of Hull. So where are we at right now? So this is the kind of the geographical distribution of the current trustees, certainly at a UK level, with representation from Scotland and then all across England and even Wales. And I think it is, present company aside, the great and the good of the fishery science and management world. We've got representation across government agencies, academia, and the Institute of Fisheries Management. We all give our time freely, as in it is unpaid. We do not get paid, obviously, to be a trustee. And we can kind of consider it our donation to Grayling and Grayling research. And as I say, we're from a very diverse range of backgrounds and representations in our day job. And we all consider it an absolute honour and a privilege to represent the Grayling Research Trust. I'll just kind of go through the individuals one by one as a bit of a kind of getting to know you exercise. But John Dart, I think many people in the room will know John. He's a medical consultant and practitioner. Had an early year training as a zoologist, but obviously in his spare time is very heavily involved in fish and fishing and the Piscatorial Society, and just kind of more or less involved in those kind of slightly more scientific matters, including around the annual Wiley Grayling survey. And it's actually via his close relationship with the Piscatorial Society and the work on the River Wiley, which has led him to the Grayling Research Trust and has been heavily instrumental in leading to a PhD that's currently happening at Southampton University, evaluating some of the renaturalisation works that are happening on the River Anton. There's Richard Cove, aka Mr. Grayling. He is everything about Grayling and has been for many years. He tells me he caught his first Grayling when he was trotting at the age of 5, was absolutely astounded by its size. Obviously, he was only a little wee nipper at the time. And then its huge dorsal fin, and has basically had a huge passion for Grayling since then on, really. His current job is the scientific monitoring officer for the Life D River project, which means that even in his day job, he doesn't have a remit or responsibility for Grayling, but he has maintained his place on the Environment Agency /NRW Trout and Grayling Fisheries Strategy Group, just out of absolute love for Grayling. His specific quote is, "Wants to influence Grayling management, even though it's no longer part of my day job." And then this is a bit of a summary of all the different things that Rich has done for Grayling over the years. He was in the National Fisheries Technical Team. He's the only member with Grayling experience back in the day and took on the role of the Grayling lead. Managed numerous different documents over the years. One notable one being the R&D review of Grayling ecology and management back in the early 2000s. And then there's just a list of all the different Grayling projects that he's been involved in, led, manufactured, facilitated, been the catalyst for, and so on and so on and so on over the years. Yeah, it's fair to say that we'd know a heck of a lot less about Grayling if it wasn't for Rich driving some of it forwards. Ross Gardiner. I asked all the trustees to see if they could provide me a photograph of them with a fish, or them especially with a grayling. And Ross deferred and basically gave me a copy of a piece of work that he did back in the day around Scottish grayling. But I think it's interesting that obviously Ross sees himself as one of the kind of main kind of driving forces behind improving our knowledge and understanding of grayling in Scotland in particular, but across their entire range. It's fair to say that he admits himself that some of the work that was in this initial kind of history and biology of Scottish grayling document has moved on a lot, predominantly via projects that have been supported and funded by the GRT. But yeah, he's obviously particularly proud of that document. I hope he's in the room today, listening to this talk right now. I think he would like to be. Whether he makes it there or not, I'm not sure. He's recently retired from Marine Scotland, and as I mentioned earlier, he was a founding member of the Grayling Society. And just a quote from someone else, they basically said Ross is a very modest man, but a real stalwart of grayling work in the UK. And I think, yeah, it's fair to say that his work and involvement across the Grayling Society and the Grayling Research Trust over the years has been, yeah, phenomenal, and we all owe him a great debt of thanks. Moving on to Martin Lucas, again, in an attempt to find a photograph of Martin with a grayling. I didn't. I found him a photograph of him with a dead rainbow trout, but I think he's quite proud of the fact that once upon a time he used to go fishing with a gentleman called Peter Cockwill. So almost 40 years ago this photo was taken, and yeah, he's currently the lead for the Aquatic Ecology Research Group at Durham University. It's fair to say that Martin is an absolute legend in his field. He supervised my PhD back in the mid 2000s. He wrote this book in the early 2000s, and people that work in my field regard this book, The Migration of Freshwater Fishes, as an absolutely pivotal, seminal text that everyone refers to. If you track fish for a living and you don't have a copy of this book on your shelf, you're doing something wrong. And he was one of the people. He led the study that tracked grayling back in the day, putting radio tags inside the body cavity of grayling and tracking them for many days and weeks on end, trying to understand their habitat use. With, as you can see, Martin there in the top right hand corner, with active tracking and radio antennas, and finding the exact specific spots that they were living in, but then also as well fixed location antennas to look at long range movements up and down river. And some of that work went on to be published, looking at specifically their behaviour in relation to elevated predation risk and their use of refuge habitat. So yeah, that's Martin, not only a hugely respected academic in his field, but has also had first-hand experience of tracking grayling. Dave Mee, another one of the trustees, lifelong passion for angling. After being introduced to fly fishing by his father, who was one of the founding members, if you recall, of the Grayling Research Trust, as you saw on the deeds. And he's fished everywhere, all over the place. The list of places that Dave's fished is somewhat enviable, I think it's fair to say. But he's been employed at basically the Environment Agency, or its various iterations over the years, National Rivers Authority, then the Environment Agency, and then when the Environment Agency split, the English and Welsh branches split, he now works for Natural Resources Wales, and he represents Wales on the England and Wales Trout and Grayling Strategy Group. Stephen Gregory, in his day job, works for CFAS, got introduced to grayling back in 2015 during the Wiley project, and he helped on that until 2021, and more recently he's been contributing to some of the publications that have been coming out of that work, some of the scientific publication, has been heavily involved in some of the analysis there, on the basis that he has his day job is a statistician, and he wants to bring some of his kind of statistical and information technology expertise to bear on grayling silence. Again, on the basis that they're a fantastic indicator of river water quality. Moving on to Paul Coulson, Director of Operations at the Institute of Fisheries Management and also Chair of East Yorkshire Rivers Trust. They've currently delivering a project right now with river keepers, angling clubs, the Environment Agency to re-establish declining grayling stocks in the River Hull headwaters. And he loves fishing for grayling using traditional grayling tactics of trotting maggots. I think he's particularly proud of that fish. I think it's nearly 3.5 pounds, and I think he got himself on the couple of Angling Times with that one. So yeah, that's the team.